Welcome to the third episode of the Simply Josephine podcast. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you. Thanks for joining in. This podcast mostly focuses on natural dye projects, sewing, and herbal medicine, because those are the three things I am mostly interested in. They generally go in that order as well. I start off with my latest natural or botanical dye project, sharing my tips and tricks and things I learned along the way. And then I move on to some sort of sewing project, what's on my sewing table. And then lastly, I finish up with whatever herbal concoction I have been experimenting or recreating. I have a small batch apothecary, so I share little things there along with soap making. I'm also a soap maker. Simply put, I am a maker. And this is the podcast where I'm going to share what I'm interested in with you. I've decided to put timestamps in the description, the video description area. That way, if you're here just for the sewing project, then you can skip ahead to that, or if you're just here for the herbal medicine or the dye project. And hopefully that will kind of break up the podcast so you can focus on just what you're interested in. In this episode, I am going to cover my latest experience with avocado pit dyeing. I also did something new. I did a soy milk mordant, so I will also go over that. Then we will move on to, I've made a few dottie angel frocks, and I will share some different alterations that I made to the pattern and show you those. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about my latest salve that I made, which was a gran fir salve. And I will go over all the steps of that at the end of the podcast. All right, well, let's jump right in. My name is Dacia. I don't think I mentioned that. So anyway, my name is Dacia, and I am Simply Josephine across the board. You can find show notes to this podcast at Simply Josephine blog, my blog, simplyjosephine.com. You can subscribe or see whatever the latest things I'm up to. And I'm also Simply Josephine on Instagram as well. Okay, avocado pit dye, soy milk mordant. I decided to dye this shirt. This was just a random white shirt that I got at the thrift store. So I dyed this white shirt, a pillowcase for my bed. I eventually want to dye all of my bedding, but we'll start with a pillowcase. I also bought this white sports bra. I dyed this as well. And about 2 yards of just cotton fabric. So the first thing I did was I scoured those, of course, and scouring is just pretty much cooking your fabric in soda ash. I did the scouring of that, and then I moved on to the soy milk mordant. And I did a little video while I was making the soy milk mordant. So I will share with you now how I went ahead and made that mordant. All right, I have have my fibers scouring here in the pot, and they will be doing their thing over here. I stir them occasionally, and then I'm going to rinse them and move on to mordanting. Like I said earlier, I'm going to do the soybean mordant, and this is going to be my second attempt at a soybean mordant. And the first attempt I did, it didn't work out very well for me, because what I have read is you want to dip your fibers in the soybean mordant, and then you want it to dry, and then you want to dip it again and then let it dry. And I tried this process outside, and it wasn't really warm enough for the fibers to completely dry out, and I kind of rushed the process, which the thing about natural dyeing is there are so many different steps, and it's a slow process, and you just have to get used to that idea. So what I'm going to try this time is that same dip and dry method, but I'm going to do it inside by the wood stove, and I'm going to make sure that it's thoroughly dried before I dip it again. And my plan is to do that this evening by the wood stove, because it still is very cold here at night and we have the wood stove going. So next I'm going to make the soybean mordant. And what I did was I soaked, well, first of all, I purchased these whole soybeans from Azure, but I'm sure they could be purchased at any sort of bulk food store or ordered online. Azure has lots of other wonderful things for sale too, so I just ordered those there. And last night I put a cup in here with some water, and it's been soaking, so it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's been soaking for, let's see, 18 hours or so. And there's not a whole lot of information out there on soybean mordanting. I came across a couple of blog posts, and I don't have any books that go into depth about that. If you have connection to some sort of soybean mordant connection, please leave a comment. I would be so interested in reading up more about it. But what I came across in this blog post was someone had soaked the beans overnight and then run them through their juicer. And I happen to have a juicer, so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to run these soaked beans through the juicer, and we'll see how that works. I may have to bust out the blender if this doesn't work, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. It's loud and annoying, so I'll probably just shut the video off for now and come back after it's been juiced or blended. So I have juiced up those soaked soybeans, and what I have discovered along the way is I definitely didn't soak enough soybeans. So I took 2 more cups out, and I have them soaking in water in here. I will go ahead and get started with this, but I'm definitely going to need more soy. I guess this is soy milk, basically, homemade soy milk. So that 1 cup of dried soybeans yielded about, I'm gonna say 8 fluent ounces, so that's like a cup as well. So that's going to be a pretty easy thing to gauge for in the future. About 1 cup of the dried beans soaked and then ran through the juicer equals about 1 cup of soy milk. So the post that I read said to mix 1 part soy puree or milk to 10 parts water. So that's probably what I'm going to start with and go from there. I'm going to have a second round to experiment with though along the way. So anyway, I thought I would just show you that juicing it does works pretty good. If you didn't have a juicer, I'm sure you could use a blender though. And I will take some pictures of the process of mordanting and then drying and mordanting and drying, and maybe I'll slip those in there in between this and the next video. Preparing the dye bath, I filled my dye pot with about 2 gallons of water, maybe a little less actually now that I think about it. And I added my avocado pits and skins to that dye pot. And then I added 3 tablespoons of soda ash to the dye pot. And I came up with that recipe online on a blog post that I will link to in the show notes if you would like to read that post. But I didn't follow it exactly because I'm not sure how many avocado pits I actually had. Over the winter, I just cut my, every avocado that I ate, I just dried the skin and the pit, and then I put them in a gallon glass jar. So I had a gallon glass jar of these dried pits and skins. And that's what I then poured into the dye pot with the, I would say probably almost 2 gallons of water. And I read there's a lot of different things out there about the avocado pit dye, and a lot of people freeze the pits and skins, and then when they're ready to create their dye bath, they just put the frozen pits and skins in. And some people don't even use the skins. But I was happy with drying them, and then they don't take up freezer space. So I don't know, I might experiment. I might try freezing some the next go around. I'm not sure. But anyway, once my dye pot was almost boiling, it never really boiled, but it was definitely pretty hot. Once it was getting up there, maybe almost to simmering, I put the fabric in, all of the fabric in, the shirt, the bra, the pillowcase, and the fabric in there, and I just, went about my business, and it sat on the stove for maybe a couple of hours, and I would stir it, and after every time I would get done stirring it, the fabric that would come out of the dye pot, as you know, if you've dyed things before, some of the fabric comes up, and it was vibrantly pink. So I knew something was happening, but when I was stirring it and looking down into the dye pot itself, it looked kind of murky. It didn't look like it was picking up much of the dye. And then I turned off the stove, brought the dye pot outside, because by this time we were having like this beautiful spring weather. And it was like 50 degrees outside. So I decided to hang these up outside on the line because it's kind of messy. So I took these piping hot pieces of cloth. I didn't even wring them out at this point. I just put them on the clothesline and let them cool off before I wrung them out a little bit. And then I let those dry outside. After everything had dried out on the line, I brought it in and washed it twice in my washing machine. And this is what I ended up with, and I am super excited about this color. I just love the peachy pink color. So the plans I have for this fabric is I want to make some reusable vegetable sacks. And that's another reason why I went with the soy milk mordant, because they're going to be food storage. So I am going to make up a lot of those, and I'll have those available wherever I'm vending. And I'm also going to do an Instagram giveaway also for a couple of the reusable vegetable sacks. And yeah, so there they are. There's the beautiful color. I'm excited, going to do it again. I'm also excited to experiment a little further with the soy milk mordant. Yeah, that was interesting. What's on the sewing table? I have been sewing so many projects lately. I have had several custom orders for aprons for different businesses and things. So it's been kind of a lot of just getting stuff done in the sewing room, but I have managed to build up some of my inventory for the market season. And I thought I would show you. I was working on these aprons. I made this one and the one I'm wearing. Both have botanically dyed fabric on them. This is, of course, not botanically dyed. This is regular conventional fabric. Same with the body of this one. But this is the black walnut dye. I went in episode 2, I go into detail about my black walnut dye. And this is dyed, is also a natural botanical dye. The purple here, this is logwood, which is very, very nice. And I look forward to ordering more logwood and dyeing more of my cotton hemp jersey knit for yoga skirts. This purple in a yoga skirt is really nice. So that's what I've been working on. Lots of aprons, lots of custom aprons, and I've also been experimenting with the Dottie Angel frock. They were pretty popular a few years ago, and this is the pattern there that I went with first. I have a few of Tiff Fussel's patterns, and this is the first one that I decided to do. So I used the first go around, which is, this is what I do with most patterns, is just like I'll just buy like thrift store fabric that I'm not crazy about, or I don't care that it matches, and I just do my first go around that way. Then I don't waste nice fabric on something possibly not turning out. And I'm very glad I did that, because I was not crazy about my first go around with this. This is the one I did, not the shirt, but the 2-part frock there with the pockets. And right away, I did not like the sleeves that are on there, like she has there. I don't know if it's just because I'm naturally broader already. It's like I don't need more emphasis off my shoulders. And I didn't really like how the whole fit happened here. So the first thing I did when I went to make this frock out of the pattern, I changed this part of it. And how I did that was, I'll show you here. So this is the front. And that is another thing. I am like too big for a medium and too small for a large. I find this across the board no matter what I'm purchasing. And so I went with the large, and it was too big for me. But I just thought I could trim it up a little bit as I went. So this is the arm part of the pattern, and I just cut in here. And I should have actually gotten rid of a little bit here. So if you decide to do this, I would cut a little bit down the back as well and just sort of tighten it up a little bit. Because then when I went to make this pattern with, oh, and another thing I did, I like the look of, and I've done this with a few things, and especially linen, of it being a little bit shorter in the front than in the back. So rather than just being a straight line hem in the front, see how I curved that so that this part is over by your side body. This is where it connects to the back of the pattern piece. And then I curved at a few inches there to make it more above the knee. I've done this with a lot of things, and I'm happy with it. I like it. I like the way it looks. I think it looks nice to have your skirt sort of be above the knee and then dip down. So that's what I went with that. So the first fabric that I did this frock with is a linen. I really like this linen fabric, but lo and behold, as I had done with my practice frock, I didn't make that smaller, that little bit smaller, and this is actually a little too big for me. And I ended up taking it in areas that, you know, it's not really that big of a deal because this, I'm just going to wear this, but I had to take it in a few places, and it ended up getting kind of chunky, if you know what I mean. So that was my first alteration, was making this part smaller. And then, like I said, I also did the hem a little bit shorter. And the ties, that was another thing about this pattern that I wasn't quite crazy about, were these ties. You put these ties in the front, and they loop around, and they tie in the back, which that's kind of bulky, you know, for everyday wear. And so I don't mind it, and I do actually wear this garment a lot, but it does have a few things about it that that just wasn't quite right. So I got on Textilia, which, if you're not familiar with Textilia, it's a really nice site to connect people who sew. And you have different profiles on there, and you can post pictures of yourself in what you've made, and you can talk about, you know, what you've done with your pattern. And then you can also connect to that pattern, and you can also see other people who have made a lot of the same garment. Well, this particular pattern has several people on there who have done it and commented. And something I went through reading them. You know, a lot of people have lots of different alterations that are super helpful. And one of the alterations that I came across was for putting a band in there rather than the ties. So my third go around with this is this one here. And I took that advice, and rather than the ties, I just put this in here. That way it pulls everything back without having the tie. I went with the same alterations with the sleeve area and the bottom, the hemline. If you can see here, this is a little bit shorter than it is in the back. This, I love this fabric, obviously. It's super, super cute. And this fabric is, well, this one that I really like that I'm wearing here, this is a cotton and steel fabric. And I love all of their fabrics pretty much, so you should check them out if you are interested, if this catches your eye. And this bottom part is a natural dye. It is Kutch. And the pockets, this is an art gallery print, I believe, that I added those in. That's another thing. The pockets, this is a pretty busy pattern. And even though this is pretty busy, it has 3 different fabrics going on here. I decided not to add, they have another piece of fabric at the top of the pocket and then bias that goes all the way around the pocket. And I decided to skip that whole part because it just would have been too busy for me. And I like things pretty busy, so I just decided to skip that part, and I just double layered the pocket. You know, I just sewed them with the right sides together, flipped it right side out, ironed it, and just top stitched over the part at the top here, and then sewed the pocket on. So, yeah, those were my alterations for that. I think I'm going to be good with these 2 frocks, and I probably won't make another one, but I definitely am happier with this garment than the linen one. Although linen is so nice, and the more you wash it, the softer it gets. So I'm not sure what I'll end up doing there, but it looks really nice with a little cardigan over it, and then you kind of can cover up the chunky parts of your garment. But yeah, I love it. Very nice. I have another pattern of hers that I haven't gotten out yet, but I'm going to experiment with that one as well. I make seasonal offerings, and they are released on the solstices and equinoxes, and it's just a box of seasonal medicines, basically. Very small batch medicine, and a lot of these items in these boxes don't ever even get listed on the website. I make them specifically for the Medicine Collective. We just had the spring equinox. So in the spring equinox gathering box, I made a grand fir salve. And I really like how the label turned out. It is really nice. Grand fir oil is super, just nice for chapped skin, and fir conifers are very calming to the nervous system. So I like this on anything. You can put it on your face, your feet, your hands, cuts, burns, sore muscles, whatever you want. Anyway, at the time that I created this, I did a little video. So I will connect to that now, and you can see the whole salve making process right now. Greetings! I am getting ready to make a salve. This is going to be a conifer salve. I'm going to use Douglas fir, or no, grand fir, excuse me. I was just looking at some Douglas fir oil I had over there, contemplating whether or not to mix them. But this is grand fir. This is an infused oil that I created in June of last year. It is now February. So I'm going to strain this into here, mix it with beeswax, and that's how you make a salve. So I like to use my straining method of choice. Is just a strainer, of course. And I also like to use cheesecloth, or you can use old linens. I use both. I'm out of cheesecloth, so I'm using some linens. But as you can see here, this has been infusing for quite a while, and it has all these needles need to get strained out so we can mix it with the beeswax. So I'm going to start to strain this right now while we're talking. If you are interested in making herbal infused oils, I've also created a video on that as well. I will put a link to that in the description part of the video. Hold on to this and whoop. Gotta kind of be careful you don't overflow it. So I'll let that strain down a little more, and I'm going to go get my KitchenAid and the jars that I'm going to put these in, and I'll be right back to talk more about this. All right, I'm back, and I have melted the beeswax in this pot here, and I have about half of the other oil in here not warmed up. So I'm going to pour this warm oil into the cooler oil, and I'm going to scrape the sides down. I'm not going to clean this out yet because there's a lot of times where you'll have to reheat your salve depending on how quickly you can get it into the jars. If you're just doing 1 cup of oil, you wouldn't have to though. But if you're making more for sale or to give away, then you will want that. So I'm going to set this on the cooler burner. Over there I have my KitchenAid. I feel like Martha Stewart with my KitchenAid here. A hippie Martha Stewart, of course. All right, so just get your stuff going here, your whisk in, and then the oil, don't put it on too high, otherwise you'll have a ordeal on your hands to clean up. And then I just put that on low. And little while. I would say 10 to 15 minutes. So I will probably go ahead and shut down the camera and come back when we are getting ready to pour them into the jars. So you can just leave that here like this, or mix by hand if you don't have a KitchenAid or aren't going to invest in an extra bowl and whisk. Or heck, if you're just doing it once or twice a year, you could probably just use your regular KitchenAid as long as you got it really clean. Again. Okay, I think that's about it for now. Alright, so this has been going for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's starting to cool down. I'm going to shut it down. Just because oil is drippy, I'm just going to set this under here for pouring. But I'm going to pour a little bit of the oil in here. And then switch these around, and we will get ready to pour the oil into the jars. I'm going to bring this over here because sometimes this can be messy. But I just carefully fill it up here. And there you go. And I just set these over here to cool. You'll want to make sure these are in an area that won't get disturbed until they set up, but it does not take long for them to set up. Not long at all. And then you have fabulous little jars of herbal loveliness. So go out, clip some herbs, make an oil, make a salve. You can make a salve out of just about anything. I would just suggest experimenting with what you have local in your area. I'm back. That was a fun little thing, wasn't it? The salve making thrown in there. Yeah, as we come to a close, I'll tell you a little bit about what we've been up to. It's getting towards the end of March, and we started all of our plants inside for the garden. So it's always nice this time of year to do some garden planning. Not all of our snow is gone yet, but it should be pretty soon. It's been a major meltdown. We've had 4 or 5 days in a row of about 60 degrees and sunny, and then coming up we're supposed to get some rain. So maybe in the next few weeks I can make it out to the garden and get on it before the weeds take over, as it seems to do. My son Riley is, oh my gosh, he's going to turn 15 at the end of the month. I can hardly believe it. Growing so fast. We've been doing driver's ed, so we've had to get up really early in the morning and do that, but it's been good. We've been doing great. Just trucking right along, making my stuff and cooking food. That seems to be what I do. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this little journey, and I look forward to next time. Bye.